Howdy folks, this is Justro at Metcalf Mills bringing you Story Time Tuesday. I've got kind of a compilation of stories today. It ain't going to be just one thing. Well, it kind of is. I'm going to tell you about some old scary, well, it ain't really scary all the way, but it'll be kind of like old Hank tales or something like that. But as far as I know, they're true. I hope you enjoy it. I've had several people mention over the since I've been doing this YouTube stuff, they've asked me a few times if I could tell some ghost stories. And the stories that I'm going to tell you was told to me. There may be one or two as my own personal experience, and then there may be other people has shared them with me of their experience, and this is all people that I trust, and I trust what they told me to be the truth. The first ones I'm going to tell you is about my great-great-grandpa, and he had something happen to him one day, and well, not one day, but it was one night, and it's not a ghost story or nothing. It really happened to him, but it's a hair raiser. So back in them days, that was probably in the teens, right after 1900 or in the teens. He was, back in, people had to hunt to survive. When they went hunting, it wasn't because they enjoyed, well, it was because they enjoyed it, but it was also to put meat on the table. And it was very important to go hunting, and whatever they could get, they'd bring it home and feed their family. That's how they put meat on the table. And the rifle that he used, you can go back, I'll link the video down in the description of this video, and you can watch that video that I done about that particular rifle. And the way the story goes was told to me by Aunt Ruby Church. I've talked a lot about her in my videos. She was my grandpa's aunt, my great-great-grandpa's daughter. So she heard this story right from him. He had went hunting one time, and she said way back over in the Black. Now, right here where we live, if you get up on top of the mountain real high, like up on the Ogle Meadow or somewhere like that you're up above everything and you can see all the way around, you can see back over to the kind of the west, you can see the Smoky Mountains. And you can see how they got that name because it's smoky and hazy looking in there. The way the mountains is, I reckon smoke and everything kind of drifts in there and hangs. And you can see the Smoky Mountains, and you come on around here a little bit, and you can see the Blue Ridge. You can see that Blue Ridge going around them mountains through there like that. Blue Ridge Mountains. And you can identify each one of these by its name. You come all the way back around here, kind of the northeast, depending on where you're standing, and you can see the Black Mountains. And that's really something to take in when you're up that high And you can look around and you can see these 3 different mountain range in the Appalachian Mountains. And you can identify them by their names. The Black Mountains, Blue Ridge, all the way around to the Smokies. That's really something to see because it's a big old vast area. Anyway, Pap was back in the Black. He went back there hunting. She didn't know where the Black was. That's assumption on my part. I assume he meant back in the Black Mountains. Because where I was standing looking around at these mountains, I'm sure he had been there before. And people had names for every mountain around. They knowed exactly. They could tell somebody, and they knowed exactly where they was talking about. So he said back in the Black. Well, he was hunting back in the Black, and he said he had hunted about all night. And he decided there before daybreak he'd lay down and take him a little rest before it got daylight. Well, she said he come up on and found him kind of a place there where the leaves had drifted in and as a kind of piled in there deep, and he thought that right there would be a good place to lay down and take me a little nap and rest. So he set his rifle, that same rifle I was telling you about, he set it up there against a tree or something or other. And he laid down in them leaves, and best I remember, she said he didn't have no light. You know, back in when the moon was full, you know, they could hunt all night by the moonlight. They didn't need no light. They could see plenty good enough on a full moon out in the mountains. You can see, it's just like, it's plenty light enough. It's unreal how light it is. But anyway, he'd hunted all night, and he's going to lay down and rest a while before it got daylight. He laid down in that pile of leaves, and he said he's laying there a little while. And he said he heard something coming around the mountain. And she said he kind of made a little noise and said he could hear it move a little bit and it'd stop. And then move a little bit and it'd stop. She said he didn't have no light to try to see what it was, so she said he just laid right still, didn't move. And it kept coming, getting closer and closer and closer to where he was there. And she said in a minute or two, he could tell it was right there where he was at. I mean, just right there. And she said he was afraid to move or do anything because he didn't know what this was coming through the mountains. He knowed pretty much what kind of animals was around there, and I mean, he spent time out in the mountains. You think about somebody go out and hunt all night, they pretty much know what's going on. But anyway, he didn't know, and he said he heard this thing, whatever it was, walk right up to where he was at. And he said he just laid still and didn't move a muscle. And he said he could tell it was getting closer and closer to him. And he said then there in a minute he could feel it right in his face. Like, just right there, he could tell. I don't know if he felt its breath or what, but he could tell this thing was right in his face. And she said that he said that he was afraid to breathe or afraid to move or do anything. And for somebody that's going to get out and go through the mountains of a night and hunt and all that, for them to be afraid, you know, it had to be something was causing him to have reason to fear. And she said in just a minute, he said this thing started raking leaves and covering him up. it was raking leaves. And he said it just kept going around him raking leaves up. And he said it covered him completely up with leaves. Well, he kept laying there being still and listening, and he said he heard the thing go off, and it got out of where he could hear it. He couldn't hear it no more. And he said when he thought it got far enough away from him, he got up out of them leaves, and he found something laying there. I think she said a chunk. Must have just been a chunk of wood or a piece of an old rotten log or a stump or something like that, and he got that chunk and he put it back in there where he was at, and he covered it up with them leaves. And he got his rifle and he went the other way from the way that thing went. And he said he got way on out around the mountain somewhere, and he said he heard the awfulest scream you've ever heard in your life. And a lot of people don't believe it, but then that time, and I still believe it's possible, they had big cats in these mountains, panthers. Some of them was black, a black panther. There's a lot of stories about them. And then some of them was just like kind of a mountain lion, or a cattymouth they called them too. That's a different kind of cat. And he didn't know exactly what it was covered him up, but whatever it was a cat, because he could tell by the way that thing screamed that it was some kind of a cat. And dog is interrupting us. Maybe they heard me talking about that big cat. And she said, Pap said he thought that probably what that thing had done had covered him up, and went back and got its kittens and come back, was going to eat him for whatever meal they's eating, supper or breakfast one. I don't know which, but she said that's what he thought, is that thing had went and got its family and come back to eat him, and when it wasn't there, that thing got mad, you know, because he had fooled it. And she told that to me, and I got no reason to doubt what she said, and I don't see Pap making up a tale like that from what I've been told by other people about him. And he said that's probably one of the scariest times that he's ever had in his life, was having that happen to him. And there was another time that he had went a-hunting, and Aunt Ruby said they had a little old dog, some kind. I don't know if it was a feist dog or what, but he'd sit down somewhere to rest, and you know, everything is real quiet, and he's sitting there by himself. And he didn't hear it, or somehow or another, that little dog had trailed him and caught up with him. And it snuck up on him, and it run up, and it jumped up on his back. And he said that scared him the worst of about anything he's ever been scared by. Besides that night, something covered him up. And these mountain people, they wasn't much I was afraid of or scared of. I mean, they was just, you know, they just wasn't. If you'd have been scared every bit, they couldn't have survived. And there's another story. This story would have been about my my fourth great grandmother, Elizabeth. They called her Betsy, and she was married to Jacob, my fourth great grandpa, and that would have been Pap Joe that I just told you them stories about. This would have been his grandparents. So Jacob and Elizabeth, they called her Betsy. She is a Buckner, Elizabeth Buckner. They lived down the road here, about a half a mile. There on the video where we looked at that old log barn that had rotted down and come straight down and the doors was gone. And then we looked at that backer barn where them goats was. On that place right there, that's where they settled and lived. And this story is about her, and it's another cat story. Well, they had settled in here. They wasn't no roads nor nothing. There's just a trail, you know, that they had pretty much cut out or blazed out to bring livestock and whatnot in here. And they lived back up in here, and they built a barn. I don't know, we're going to look at an old barn on that place that I was showing you sometime, and it wouldn't, I don't think that was part of it, because the logs in that barn is part of the old original log house that was there. But anyway, there's a barn there that she done the milking in. And she'd went out one morning to milk a cow. And she'd, you know, when you're milking, you're down on a little stool. Or if they didn't have a stool, they'd just squat down and milk the cow in a bucket. Well, Aunt Ruby also told me this story. So she went out to the barn and got the milking the cow. And there was a wildcat. Aunt Ruby said a wildcat. I don't know what kind of cat it was. She just said a wildcat. Maybe like a bobcat or a catamount. Cattymount's what Aunt Ruby said. This thing was up in the barn. So she's there squatted down milking the cow, and this big cat was up in the barn there. And this thing jumped out on her back. That was the way them cats would do, especially Panthers. I think that's why that dog jumping on Pap's back, sneaking up on him, I think that's why it scared him so bad, because them Panthers and cats they'd usually hide up on a limb or in a tree, and when anything come along, it'd jump out on it, take it down and bite it and, you know, kill it. So I think that's why it scared him so bad when that dog jumped on his back. But anyway, this cat jumped out of the barn down on Grandma Betsy's back. And I've been in a few scrapes with a cat. When I was a boy growing up, get to messing with an old cat and it'll tear you up. I mean, them things gets a hold of you and you can't get them off. They won't turn you loose. And you can't sling them off either, because they got claws and teeth in you. So I've thought about this a lot, but you take a big mountain cat, way bigger than a house cat, thing jumped off on her back, and Aunt Ruby said she got this cat some way, I don't know how, got it and wrestled this cat down and held this cat down and hollered for some of the men to come and kill this cat. I don't know if I could do that or not. Number one, something jumps on you like that and bites you or claws you, it's going to scare you to death. And number two, if you've ever had a hold of a cat, if it gets scared or it don't want you messing with it, I don't know how in the world she is able to handle a big wildcat, but that just goes to show you that day and time how tough somebody was. And two, I know it take in account you're kind of fighting for your life. So, but anyway, she got this wildcat down and held that thing until somebody come and helped her with it. That's just, to me, that is. So back from me, that would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 generations back from me, Grandma Betsy done that, wrestled that cat. And her and her and Jacob got married around 1824, and they settled in here sometime after that. So this would have been in the early mid 1800s, I'd say, is when this happened. Now, that story has always just amazed me. You know, somebody to be that tough to be able to wrestle a wildcat down and hold it there. I mean, it speaks for itself. Another story about another cat, Mother told me, and Papa, her daddy, told her and them this story. If I can remember it correctly, I hope I can. They lived somewhere, I don't know if it's on the head of Beetree here in Madison County or somewhere, but he had to walk across a mountain. I don't know if I think he's going to work at a sawmill or something. He had to walk across the mountain a long ways. And back in, everybody traveled through the gaps of the mountain. You know, a gap is a low place. They always went for that low place. That was the main thoroughfares, because they didn't go around where the roads go nowadays. They'd go up here and go through the gap and be way away from where they was at in a short distance, see. So he'd go up across the mountain to work, and he said he was coming home one time, and it was snowing. And there was a big cat got to following him, and this cat was following him in the snow, and he said it kept getting closer and closer and closer, and he started making snowballs and throwing at that cat because he didn't have nothing else. He didn't have no gun. Snow was all over the ground, so he started making snowballs and throwing at that cat, trying to run it off. And I guess it worked because he made it on home, but that's a story in itself. And I'll back up, and that reminds me of another story Aunt Ruby told me about Pap. In the head of this holler up here, the Uncle Lee old house, where Uncle Lee lived, was way back up in the head of this holler. It was the last house before you start up to the Old Field Gap and go across into Yancey County down on Indian Creek. Well, Pap had been hunting, and I think he had been killing squirrels. Well, he was coming in that evening, and it started getting dark on him, and there was a cat started following him. And he said he was watching and trying to, you know, move on and get away from it. And it got real close to him, and he started them squirrels he started taking them squirrels and throwing them down to try to get that thing, you know, to leave him alone. But he said every time it'd keep coming. And he kept throwing them squirrels, and he got down to the Uncle Lee old house, and they said he just run and busted through that door because that thing was right there just about to jump on him. And he is out of squirrels to throw. I don't know, I guess it wasn't concerned with them squirrels because it was after him, I guess is how it was. I wasn't clear on that, but he lost his squirrels and just barely made it. They said, Aunt Ruby said they told her he just come and just busted through the door because that thing is just about to jump on him. So, in these mountains, it was tough times, and I have heard other stories from people that I didn't know to be, I don't know if it's just tales or truth, but the stories I told you is from people I trust to be true. I've heard other stories about panthers jumping out of trees on people's backs and on horses and, you know, things like that, but I don't know none of them to be true because I don't know the people that told them or that it happened to. I don't doubt that it could have happened, or if it did happen, I don't know, but it's real possible from other things I've been told. And my mother told me one time, I think she said it was on a Saturday or a Sunday evening, I don't know. It might have been on a Saturday evening. Pa and Grandma was gone somewhere, and Daddy was gone somewhere, and Mother was here by herself at the house when they lived in the old house down there across from Grandma and Pa's. And Mother said there's a car went down the road. She heard the car go down the road. And just a minute, she heard sound like a woman screaming, just screaming like crazy. And she said, that car's wrecked down there. That car's wrecked and somebody's hurt. She took off out the house and went down the road to go down there and help, and got way down there. And she never could find nobody. So what she thought is that was a panther screaming, because that's what everybody says. They sound just like a woman screaming. So she said when she got down there and they wasn't nothing or nobody around, she said the hair started standing up on her neck, because she was a long way from the house, you know. She just went down the road to see if she could help somebody in trouble, and nobody around but her. So she got back to the house, and me too, growing up, there was one time that I heard a scream like that in my lifetime up the road here. And I went up the road and I never could see nobody or nothing. And then one time, I was coming down the road. I had been up to a neighbor's house. I had a little motorcycle, a little dirt bike that I'd ride around all over the place. And I was coming down the road, and I remember I was coasting it. I didn't have it running. I was coasting, and I was just coasting down the road. There's a curve right up here above us, and it was just getting dark. I mean, you could still see, but you couldn't see in detail. And I come around that curve, and right there in the road, there's a big old black, it looked like a big black cat to me. And when I come around that curve, it turned and run back up in the woods, up a mountain there. And that's the only thing that's ever happened to me, or that I've seen with my own eye. But the way this thing moved, and as big as it was and how it looked, that's all I could say, that it was a big, dark looking cat. Black or brown, I don't know that, but it was real dark looking. It run back up in the woods. That's the only thing I've ever seen. Daddy one time said he was coming back across Walker Branch, and down there where there wasn't no houses or nothing, there's a big old pasture over there, and he said he looked over there and he seen a big old black cat going through the edge of that pasture. Said it had a big old long black tail. And there's been people that's seen mountain lions back up in the big mountains around here. I've not heard of none lately. One of the last accounts I heard was from a man that lived way back up in the high mountains, and he said he seen a mountain lion up there one day across the road, and he said it was real poor looking, and he said he could see its ribs, and it didn't look healthy at all. It looked real bad. So that's the only things that I can say that I've seen, or somebody that I know has seen in the recent years. But cats have been here. They may still be here. Another thing that, to me, that would make it so they could be here, you know, if a cat, like just an old stray cat or a house cat or an old feral cat, if they don't want you to see them, you ain't going to see them. They can live in your barn or somewhere, and if you don't see them, if they don't want you to see them, you ain't going to see them. And the way things is now, the hillsides and everywhere, they ain't pastured like they was. Used to, everybody pastured. They pastured the woods and the pastures, and everything was clean. The cattle kept everything clean. And you could see in the woods a long ways because there wasn't no underbrush growed up. And nowadays, nobody ain't hardly pasturing, not compared to what they was when I was growing up. A lot of the places it was grass, pretty clean pasture fields, now has growed up in trees 30, 40 foot tall. So it's changed a lot. And these thickety places, you can't see. There's so much more place now for wild animals to hide and not be seen. a better chance for them now to be around than they've ever been, because there's more places it's growed up, and yeah, there's a lot more houses and things went in too, but there's a whole lot more growth and wilderness like thickety places for them to live and not be seen. So I don't know. They may still be here. I know there's bobcats. I've seen big old bobcats, cattymounts, big bobcats. They're around. I know that for a fact. I've seen them. And if you got chickens that goes missing, nothing, just gone of a night, bobcat probably. Well, I reckon that's about all my cat stories I got to share with you. If I think of any more, I'll share them again. I got some other old stories that maybe what you might consider ghost stories. I'll tell you in them. I'll share them with you on another Story Time Tuesday. Jins will enjoy that. So I hope yous have had a good Tuesday today. Today's a girl's first day of school. They both done real good this morning. They went in tickled to death, and we went in and we was the first ones in Charlotte's room, me and Virginia and Charlotte, and we went over at her cubby, and she put her things in her cubby there, and you know, I didn't know if she'd be sad for me to leave, but we put her things up, and she turned around and she said, "Well, Pops, I'll see you later. Bye." So she was excited about starting school today. That wasn't the way I was, and that wasn't the way Virginia was. I remember my first day of school, they had to about prise me loose from Daddy, and when I turned around and I seen, they got me busy doing something, and I turned around and I seen Daddy was gone, and I took out of that classroom and down the hallway, run him down. He had to bring me back in there, and they finally got me to stay. And Virginia, it wasn't easy for her to either. She went to daycare while I was working, but Charlotte was just as happy as she could be. She's got two good teachers. They're real fine people, and she is tickled to death. She went and met her teacher last Friday, and I know she's having a good day, but that's what's going on today. I hope you enjoyed this. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you ain't already. Tell your friends about me. If you live out in the mountains, keep your eyes open for big cats. This is Justro at Metcalf Mills. I look forward to seeing you next time.